In this video, I'd like to cover a few changes I'd like to make to the game, and I have made some videos, but this video hopefully can be used to clarify creating lives and a system to display a scoreboard. So before I get started, I just want to point out a couple of things I did previously. Previously, I created a new room and I placed it on top. And by placing it on top, it's going to be what happens when the game first is run. And then it will progress through the other rooms as you go through the game. So I call it the start room. And in the start room, I made an object here called start game. And this object, I don't need a sprite. I just have a very simple event. And the very simple event that I added is any key on the keyboard pressed. And by pressing on any key, I'm going to say go to the next room. So we see that in the rooms, and you'll see go to the next room when I hover just right here. So go to the next room I've got right here, and that is pretty simple. So I'm going to press OK, and then I'm going to go to the objects, and I'm going to say, let's put the start room object on, and I'm going to put it in the top corner here. And the reason I put it in the top corner is so that I remember that I added it. Because there's no sprite, sometimes it's hard to remember that I added it. The next object I'm going to make is going to be a game controller. So I'm going to right click on create object, and I'm going to call this object, I'm not even going to call it OBJ, I'm just going to call it game underscore controller. Again, I don't need a sprite, but what I want to do is keep track of the score and the lives. So I'm going to add an event called create. When the game controller is created, what I want to do is I'm going to go to the score tab, and I'm going to say when the game's created, or this object game controller is created, the score is going to be 0, and then I go to lives here, and I'm going to set the lives to be 3. So I've got 3 lives, and maybe you want to put 4 or 5, or 9 lives even. It's up to you. Great. Now that I've added this game controller, I want to display it as a scoreboard. And to display it as a scoreboard, I add another special event, and the only way we can display things is with this event here called draw. So I'm going to click on draw for my event, and I want to just point out a couple of things. See, some of the items are yellow. Draw score, draw lives, draw health. Those are all yellow. In fact, as you look through different tabs, if things are yellow, draw text, draw variable. As things are yellow, those would indicate that they go in the draw event. So we've got to be special in the draw event. If I want to display something on the screen, it's got to be a yellow icon, and it has to be in this event called draw. We have to create an event called draw. So I'm going to go back to drawing the lives, which is this yellow one here. And this option says display a caption, LIVES, great. And where do I want to put it? Well, maybe I want to put it just over here, 3 or 4 squares over. And so that would probably be about 150 for X. And just so it's not touching the top wall, I'm going to move it down ever so slightly, maybe about 4 or 8 pixels down, but I'll put 4 for now. So I'm going to draw the number of lives, which when it was created, it should be 3, and then I'm going to draw the score. So again, I'm going to drag score, and I can either keep the caption that says score or not. I'm going to put it down the same 4 pixels, and I'll put it maybe over about maybe 400 pixels across the screen. So sort of more like halfway across the screen. I'm just going to run this program so that you can see what it looks like. So when I run it, what we're expecting is that the game is going to start, and when the game starts, it's going to start on the start screen, and it should display the number of lives and the score that I have that was set in the create event. And it didn't, oh shoot, because I didn't add it to the room. Whoops. So what I need to do is in my room, I need to make sure that I've added the game controller. So I select game controller, and I'll put the game controller up here. So you can tell that the game controller is selected because at the bottom of the room when I hover over it, it says the object I'm hovering over with my mouse is a game controller. And if I hover over the object right here, it says this is the start game. So sorry about that. I made a fundamental flaw there. So I'll hit start again, and you're going to see the game controller and you're going to see the start game are in this first room. They have no sprites, so you actually, I guess, won't see them. But what we will see is the draw event in which the scores and the lives draw on the screen. And they did, but it wasn't in the recording, so I just need to change my game settings so it doesn't start in full screen mode. My apologies. Okay. I saw that it worked on my screen, but of course it didn't work in the video. So you'll see when I start the game the next time. One of the last things I want to talk about with this game controller is I want to put a check mark here where it says persistent. And this is kind of a funny one. The reason I put a check mark here where it's persistent is because how I want the game to work is when the game is started in the start room, what's going to happen is the create event, because the game controller is in the room, what's going to happen is the game controller's create event is going to trigger and it's going to create the lives. But I don't want it to recreate itself in room 5 or room 3 or room 0 or room 1 or any of these rooms. So I do want it to exist, but I don't want the create event to happen. And so what I can do is we are going to put a check mark right here that says persistent. And when I make it persistent, if the game controller is in this room, it's also going to exist in any of the following rooms. It's going to be what they call persistent. It's going to always exist. So what this is going to do is the create event won't go, but the draw event will go. Now, one more change I want to make, because I've done this many, many times, is one more change I want to make is when I go to the second and third rooms, I want to display the health and the lives, or the score and the lives rather, but I don't want it to display in the start screen. So what I can do is I can say, okay, how many, I can test, I can count something. And I can say how many people, object person. And if there's an object person in the room, which there isn't in this start room, as you can see, then I would like you to draw things. One more thing I'm going to draw here that I'd like to just demonstrate. I'm going to draw a variable. So let me click on a variable here. And the variable I want to draw is object person's variable X, just to demonstrate. So I'm going to right click on X. I'm going to go copy, and I'm going to say draw the variable object person, so the name of the object, and then if I put a dot, I can list a variable that's associated with the person object. And one of the things I've really been trying to teach in this class is about the variable X and the variable Y. They're very useful, and that's the location. So if I'm debugging, I might do something like this. Maybe the X and Y position of the person is confusing me and things don't seem to be happening when I think they should. So I can test the value of that variable, the variable X in this case, of the person, and I can display that on the screen. Where? well, I might put it at, let's say 550 pixels across the screen. And then I might draw something else just so I know what I was drawing here, that variable. So before I draw that, I might draw some text and say X, which is the name of the variable. Actually, I guess it's a lowercase x. And so again, I'm going to put that maybe 4 pixels down, and the X position maybe 500 pixels across because I put the score there. Great. One last thing I'd like to do is I'd like to put a background for my start screen. So I drew a background that says the maze game. So in the room here that I have called my start room, I'm going to go to the tab here that says background, and I'm going to place the background of the maze game here. So when I press play, what you're going to see is the maze game is going to load up here. And notice it's not going to display the lives or the score at this point in the start screen because it is the start screen. And so here's the maze game. So it starts up. There's no person in this room, but there is object start game, which is any key. So I'm going to now press any key, and you're going to see it's going to display lives up here, score up here, and then variable X of the person, which is 32. And so I'm just going to move my person, and you're going to see the X variable right here that I drew. You're going to see that it changes. As I move, the X position of the X and the Y position of my person is going to change. So currently, the position right here of X, how far it is from the left-hand side, is a value of 288. I'm going to move over a bit so I line up with this and watch what happens to the X. As I move over here, I'm going to move this rock, and you'll see the X is at a different position. I can use that and go to the next room. One of the things, if I'm going to put the lives and the score up at the top here, one other thing I might want to do is I might want to, in my rooms, I might want to make sure that the top of the screen is blank. And so that's going to require a little bit of changing of my room. And so I might put the walls down like this for that part of the room. The last thing I want to do in my game is I want to change what happens when I hit a monster. So if I hit a monster, I want to change 2 things in here. What I want to do is when the person has a collision with monster, instead of restarting the game, I'm going to say set the lives to -1 and restart the room. Let me show you how I do that. So what I do is I go to lives, I drag lives here, and instead of saying add 1, I'm going to say subtract 1, and of course that's relative. So when I had 3 lives, it's going to go down to 2, 2 lives go down to 1, 1 lives go down to 0, and then I'm going to restart the room. So not the game, just the room. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the game controller, and in the game controller there's one more event I'd like to show you, and if I click on other, there's an event that says I have no more lives. And so now when I run out of lives because I hit monsters enough times that I'm out of lives, at that point I'm going to go to the restart game and add that when I run out of lives. Great. So a couple things we've done here. We've learned about the draw event of the game controller. We learned the game controller was persistent, so the create is only going to make the lives at one spot. We learned that we can have no more lives to restart the game. And in the person, when they have collisions with the monsters, we lose lives. And then we learned about the draw event. In the draw event, I counted how many people, and if there was a person on the screen, I would draw things. I also showed you how I could draw some text, and I'm going to move that text over a bit, maybe 525, where I drew the letter X. And then I also have here where I could draw the value of a variable. maybe at position 540. Great, so we covered lots of things, and that's what I want you to add to your game now.